Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. This video we are going to discuss about chapter 2 of class 7th NCERT, which deals with the geography, and the chapter we are going to discuss is about understanding the weather. So if you look at this particular chapter, the chapter similar to other chapters start with a quote that is given by Marcel Proust, who was a well-known French novelist. Now he says that a change in the weather is sufficient to create the world and oneself anew. That means whenever weather changes, we know that we have weather such as spring, we have autumn, we have summer, we have winter, and within these seasons also every day or every week weather seems to be changing quite few times. So this change itself is enough to create a new world and also individually a person anew. Now the biggest question that this particular chapter try to answer, which will focus in discussion later, is how can we measure and monitor the weather around us. That means weather has many elements such as wind speed, temperature, humidity, precipitation. So how do we measure all of these parameters? And second question the chapter will try to answer is how do weather predictions help us prepare for events which are sometimes similar to disaster such as heavy rain, storms, drought and heat wave. Now in the first part of chapter, the weather and its element is what we have discussed. So chapter start with an imaginary exercise where you can think that you wake up one winter morning and start shivering because you're feeling very cold. You reach for the thick clothes to keep yourself warm. On the other hand, in summer your behavior is quite different. You choose clothes that keep you cool and comfortable. So why you are behaving differently in two different seasons? Why you are behaving differently in winter and in summer? And the reason is because of the body's signals. You are responding to your body's signal, which is sensing the weather and its parameters around it. Now, the biggest question is that what is a weather? And weather can be simply explained as a state of Earth's atmosphere at a particular time and a particular place. We know that atmosphere is a kind of thin envelope of gas, or we can also call it as a gaseous envelope. As you can see from this particular photograph, this is our Earth, land mass of the Earth, ocean of the Earth, and above that you can see a thin layer, and this gaseous envelope, thin layer of gaseous envelope is what we call as atmosphere. And in the case of the gases that we have in the atmosphere, most of time rather than saying atmospheric gases, we use a more popular or well-known term, that is air as such. Now what actually happened is that Earth's atmosphere, if you look at the Earth's atmosphere, it may be compared to a cake with several layers. For example, whenever you look at the cake, it has multiple layers. For example, bottom layer, then middle layer, then you have the uppermost layer. So the bottommost layer of the atmosphere is what we call as troposphere, and it is a troposphere where all land-based plants, animals, even including humans, live and breathe. That means for our survival, troposphere is the most important layer. It plays a very important part. It is also where almost all the weather phenomena takes place. No matter whichever weather phenomena you can think of, rainfall, snowfall, strong wind movement, cyclones, tornadoes, whatever can come into mind, generally they all occur in the single layer, the bottommost layer, that is the troposphere layer. Now overall, troposphere varies in height. It can be as low as 6 kilometers and can go as high as 18 kilometers. And this variation is on the basis of where you are standing on the Earth. That means if you look at the Earth, we have described that you have equator and you have poles. This we have discussed in the earlier chapters. So if you are standing near the poles, the height of troposphere will be lowest. That means it will be around 6 kilometers. If you are standing near the equator, the height of troposphere would be highest, which can be as high as 18 kilometers as such. The reason is because of temperature. Near pole, we know temperature is very low, air is colder, and cold air is denser, it contracts. On the other hand, near the equatorial and tropical areas, temperature is very high, air is warmer, and the warm air expands. So as it expands, it further vertically goes in the upward direction. So this is overall discussion about weather and the atmosphere. Now when we talk about weather, we can define it in many ways. For example, we can have hot, cold, rainy, cloudy, humid, snowy, windy, all these kind of weather. And this basically is the experience that we get, especially our body receives this signal, and these are basically the signal coming from the elements of weather. Now, what are the elements of weather? If you take a look at the various elements, the first and the most common one is the temperature. Temperature tells you how hot or cold the atmosphere is. That's why in winter you feel cold, in the summer you feel hot. Similarly, other element is precipitation. Precipitation can be simply understood as if any form of water such as rain, snow, sleet or hail falls from the sky to the earth's surface, that we call as precipitation. Now rain and snow is very well known understandable term. Now what is sleet and hail? So sleet is a term that we refer to frozen or partly frozen rain as such. For example, you have solidified ice. When it starts to fall toward the earth's surface, temperature increases and a part of this ice start to melt. So that kind of structure is what we are calling as sleet. Similarly, hail is a term that we refer to small hard balls of ice. Generally, they are larger as far as their diameter and size is concerned, that fall from the sky like rain. So instead of liquid drop, you have the falling up of small hard balls of ice that we call as hail. And other term that we use is water vapor. Water vapor is simply if the water is present in gaseous form in our atmosphere rather than liquid form. So precipitation. Third element of weather is atmospheric pressure. Atmospheric pressure can be simply explained as the weight of air above us. We have just discussed this is the Earth's surface. You are standing on the Earth's surface. So when you are standing on the Earth's surface, entire Earth is surrounded by a blanket of gases, and this blanket of gas is what we have referred as the atmosphere. So when atmosphere is located above the Earth's surface, it is applying pressure above you. It is applying its weight above you. So this entire weight is what we feel in the form of atmospheric pressure. Wind is simply, as we know, that entire atmosphere is made up of air, and when this air begins to move, starts to move, this is called as wind. Wind also measures the speed as well as the direction of the air movement. And last is humidity. As we have discussed, humidity is nothing but the amount of water vapor that is present in your atmosphere and air as such. Now here interesting thought experiment is given in NCERTs, where it is asking that you can take a look at an example where a person, Krishnan, is sitting in Chennai and a person called as Amir is sitting in Kashmir. So when they are talking about what basically Krishnan from Chennai is saying, that what he feel is a chilly weather in the Chennai because in the previous night there was rain. Amir asked how cold it is. How will Krishnan explain to Amir how cold it is? He can use temperature as a measurement unit and then explain that this is this much degree of temperature. But if you try to think, Amir is sitting in the Kashmir where temperature is generally always low. So whatever is temperature which is colder for Krishnan can be very well pleasant for Amir as such. So that's why the sense of chilliness to Amir, you cannot basically express it in the subjective manner. You need to have some commonly agreed way to measure the temperature by which you can effectively communicate the weather elements as such. Now, the modern forecast depends on the evaluation and measurement of all these parameters such as temperature, rainfall, humidity and all that. But earlier time, such scientific instruments and knowledge was not available to the humans. So humans used to closely observe the nature, and based on this observation, they began to understand the signals to forecast the weather, whether it is going to be rainy weather, whether it is going to be hot weather, humid weather and all. And various such examples we can take from this particular image itself, like observation of nature's cues. One of the observation the humans made earlier is that ants, if you look at the ants here, ants began to shift their eggs to higher ground in a natural behavior. Now, why ants will shift their eggs from lower ground to higher ground? That might be because of the possibility of heavy rain, because heavy rain is maximum will be seen in the lower areas where you will have the possibility of flooding. That's why ants want to protect their eggs as such. Similarly, take example of Western Ghats in India, where a frog is croaking in the forest. Why a frog is croaking? So earlier humans believed that the croaking is in the expectation of rain. So when the frogs began to croak, you can imagine that, or you can expect that rainfall is about to come. Third example you can take is of the opening and closing of pine cones. Pine, as you know, is a very common tree that is found in the temperate areas, Himalayan areas. So if you look here, two images are given. One is the closed cone, one is the open cone. So it is believed that pine cones used to close whenever humidity was higher. Why? Because they wanted to protect their seeds from the humid condition. And whenever you have dry condition, you can see the pine cones used to open up so that seeds can be released and they can spread in the favorable weather. So these are the example that how even without scientific instrument, even without scientific knowledge, by looking at the cues from nature, we can have certain understanding about the weather phenomena. Now there is a term you should be aware about called as meteorology. Meteorology is nothing but the systematic study of weather and its evolution. This study itself is the basis for the weather forecasting that we do today. So meteorologists these days, they try to predict the weather in a particular region after not just by looking up the sky and by guessing. They have got some cool gadgets, a few of which we will now look at. Now we have already discussed the elements of weather, and the first element we have talked about is the temperature. So temperature is very important because temperature tells you whether it is snow, whether snow will melt or not. Temperature tells you whether you will have cloudy weather or less cloudy weather. In winter, if temperature drops, coconut oil turns solid. In cold weather, curds, if you're trying to set up the curds, it takes longer time to set up. So all of these are the effect of temperature itself. Now, with reference to temperature, some common and important terms we have to keep in mind here. One is the ambient. Many times you would see meteorologists use the term that is ambient temperature. So what is ambient temperature? We have to understand, it gives you idea about the degree of hotness or coldness. Ambient refers to the immediate surrounding. That means we are talking about ambient temperature, we are talking about the temperature with reference to that person, what kind of temperature he or she is experiencing around himself or herself. Similarly, other point is a statistic, that is a technique of gathering and analyzing information or data in order to be able to detect patterns, understand events, or make prediction. So if you want to make prediction, you need to collect a lot of information, lot of data, and that collection of data such as temperature recordings become a useful statistic to predict the weather. Two such points we can add here. First is the range of temperature, which meteorologists take into account. Range of temperature is simple to understand, no matter whichever place you are living at. So at that place, whatever is the maximum temperature you have recorded in last 24 hours, and what is the minimum temperature you have recorded in the last 24 hours. If you take a difference of that, that gives you the range of temperature. Suppose that in the city where you're living, the maximum temperature in the day recorded was 30 degrees Celsius and minimum temperature recorded in the day was 20 degrees Celsius. So the range of temperature would come out to be 10 degrees Celsius, that is maximum minus minimum, 30 minus 20. Second statistical measurement that we make is the mean daily temperature. Mean daily temperature is defined in the similar manner. Suppose we take the same example. The maximum temperature is 30, minimum temperature is 20. So to calculate mean daily temperature, you add them both and divide by 2. So this will come out to be about 25 degrees Celsius. So the range of temperature for that day would be 10 degrees Celsius. And if we talk about the mean daily temperature of that day, it would come out to be 25 degrees Celsius. So these two act as a very important data sets to explain and understand the weather phenomena. Now, Indian Meteorological Department that was set up in 1875 during British time itself, this is the agency responsible for weather forecast and weather prediction in India. The motto, as you can see from the logo of this particular organization, is Adityat Jayate Vristi. What it means? It means is that from the sun arises rain. Now many times it seems counterintuitive because sun is responsible for hot weather, hot climate, while rain brings cold kind of weather. So how can sun create rain? So the phrase comes from the ancient text Manu Smriti, and the complete sentence, if you look, because a part of that sentence is only used as a motto here. So entire sentence is, from the sun arises rain, from rain comes food. Why from rain comes food? Because we know that the monsoon rain in India is responsible for crop production by supporting irrigation in the agriculture, in the field, farmlands and all. And from food, living beings originate. Can you imagine the survival of living beings without food? The answer is no. So all of them are very well connected. Sun is connected to rain is connected to food, and the food is essential for the survival of living beings and such. So can you think of a reason why rain arises from the sun? Let us try to understand it. So basically, suppose this is the landmass, and here you have the ocean, for example, or water bodies, and sun is in the sky. So sun sends its radiation, and this radiation that comes from the sun, the heat that comes from the sun, in simple terms we can understand, then warms the surface. As the surface becomes warmer, what happens? Air also gets warm, and the warm air rises in the upward direction because it has more energy. So when the warm air rises up, and at the same time high temperature is also causing evaporation, we can say the water that you have in the ocean or the water bodies, they undergo evaporation. Evaporation is simply conversion of water from liquid form to gaseous form. So first of all, sun is causing evaporation. So a lot of water vapor you will find near the surface. And now here the air is rising in which direction? Upward direction. So the rising air would also transport all these water vapor in the upper part of atmosphere. And as you go in the upper part of atmosphere, temperature decreases, temperature is low, temperature, we can say the ambient temperature is cooler. And that's why under the cool temperature, low temperature, this water vapor condense again back into the liquid form, and then again when they convert into liquid form, they fall down toward the earth's surface, and that's what we experience in the form of rainfall. So you can understand that there cannot be rainfall without heating by sun. So that's how you can say that rain arises from the sun itself. The second weather element we have discussed about is precipitation. As we have seen, precipitation is the falling down of water in any form from the atmosphere to the earth's surface. Now, many times in the news you would hear this kind of statement that a particular place received 30 millimeter of rainfall in a day. So what basically it means, the 30 millimeter of rainfall. So this number that you are representing is on the basis of water that is collected in this special instrument that is designed called as rain gauge. Now imagine that here rainfall is going on. So as rainfall occurs, all the rainwater keeps trickling down through this funnel and then keeps accumulating in this particular gauge where we have fixed a kind of measurement scale. So you can see you have collecting funnel, you have the measuring tube, and you have measuring scale. So in 24 hours, suppose water is collected up to this height. So what is this height? This height is equivalent to 30 millimeter, or we can say 3 centimeter. So based on this, we will say that in the entire day, the particular place received 3 centimeter of rainfall. Suppose if rain was very heavy and in the same 24 hour, now the entire tube has filled up to this level. So this is what height? As we can see, it represents 7 centimeter height. So now we will say that the entire place has received 70 millimeter of rainfall in the 24 hours of period. So that is how we measure the precipitation. The unit is millimeter, centimeter sometimes used, and the instrument is called as rain gauge. The third weather element we have studied is the atmospheric pressure. As we know, we have seen that the atmospheric pressure is the weight of entire gaseous envelope that we see being experienced by us when we are living on the earth's surface surrounded by tropospheric layer. So our bodies are quite aware of temperature and rainfall, but you may also have experienced that the weather sometimes feel heavy. Like before thunderstorm, you will feel that there is a general sense of heaviness in the atmosphere. Why there is general sense of heaviness? This is because there is a change in the atmospheric pressure. If the pressure exerted by the weight of air above is higher, you will feel heavy. If the pressure exerted is relatively low, you will feel relatively what you can call as lighter in nature. And also interestingly, if you look, we know that entire earth surface has variety of feature. For example, you can have sea or ocean, then you'll have plain, then we have discussed before in the chapters, we have plateau, then you have the mountains. So what we actually observe is that the atmospheric pressure is higher near the sea coast. That means if you're standing here near the sea level, you will feel much more higher atmospheric pressure. On the other hand, suppose if you're standing at the mountain top, the pressure you would feel will become lower and lower, and air gets thinner as you go up along the mountain compared to the plain areas where you're staying. As a result, air pressure is lower, less oxygen is available for your lungs to take in, and because less oxygen is available in the atmosphere itself, it simply means that there is less oxygen that is getting into your blood. So your body, your blood requires oxygen to survive, and that's why your body has to work harder to keep you moving. Now, how will body work harder in this case? You will feel breathless because you do not have enough oxygen as such. You can also feel dizzy or tired at high altitude. This does not mean that atmospheric pressure is always high in the plains below or on the coast. In fact, it sometimes drops dramatically, resulting in what meteorologists called as a depression or low pressure system. And this is something you will see taking place whenever you have development of a tropical storm or even a cyclone. So that is the parameter we have talked about, the atmospheric pressure. So how do we measure atmospheric pressure? The scientific instrument to measure atmospheric pressure is called as barometer. As with thermometers, there are several types of barometer, and in the barometer, the unit in which we record the temperature is called as millibar. Abbreviated form is called as MB. So when you talk about the pressure, generally normal pressure that is exerted by atmosphere on you, it comes out to be about 1013 millibar. A pressure below 1000 millibar indicates a depression. So when we are talking about here, general pressure is 1013. So pressure is reducing by 30 millibar. So whenever pressure reduces even below 1000 millibar, we say that there is a development of depression in that particular area. So depression always is associated with a low pressure condition. Here a term you should keep in mind, that is acclimatize. Acclimatization simply refers to the adjustment to a new climate or new condition. We can take example of Khardungla. Khardungla is considered as the highest motorable road in the world. It is situated at the height, as you can see, of 18,380 feet in the Himalaya region. Himalayas, more specifically, this pass is located in the Ladakh region. In meters, if you calculate, the height of Khardungla is about 5,600 meters above sea level. So, if you go to such height, your body needs time to acclimatize. Acclimatize means to adjust to this new climate, new condition, because we have just seen higher you go, lower is the atmospheric pressure, thinner the atmosphere, lower the temperature. So these sudden changes is not easily adjusted by body. It needs some time to acclimatize. The fourth is wind. Wind, we have discussed, is the movement of air from generally areas of high pressure to the areas of low pressure. And when we are describing wind, we try to describe it by measuring and expressing two parameters. One is the speed of wind and other is the direction of wind. So wind has become wind basically is considered as an important element of weather. Why important element of weather? Because by looking at the wind direction, you can predict a lot of, or you can actually do a lot of weather forecasting. And air pilots, sailor, for example, they need to be aware about the wind data. Otherwise, it will influence their flying or sailing as such. For example, many times, if winds are very strong, coming from opposite direction, and an aircraft is trying to land at the same time, it becomes difficult for the aircraft to land because wind is not allowing it to reach to the ground surface. Similarly, if the aircraft is trying to land and wind is blowing from below, behind the aircraft, in that case, before aircraft can land, it can be again launched back into the atmosphere because wind speed is very strong. So that's why the pilots, the sailors in the ocean, they depend very much on the data collected regarding wind movement, that is wind speed and wind direction. Now the question is that how do we measure the direction and the speed of wind? And here the instrument that we can see, this is called as wind vane, also sometimes called as weather vane. So weather vane has a rotating arm and you have a kind of sock like structure. So whenever the wind blows, the tail is pushed and the pointer turns in the direction of wind. So example, if wind is coming from the west and moving to the east, it will look something like that. If suddenly wind changes and wind start to turn from east to west, right, wind start to turn from east to west, in that case this weather vane will also change its direction and the sock will get oriented in the other direction as such. So this wind vane, many times you would see, is installed on the tarmac. When you are flying in the airport, you will see this installed in tarmac. Then it is called as wind shock. It gives pilot an indication of the direction of the wind during takeoff as well as during the landing stage. Now, simplest instrument to measure the wind direction and speed that we use is also called as anemometer. And this is the picture of anemometer, as you can see from here. So this is a free to rotate kind of this we can say panel, and this is a kind of disc like structure you can see. So total 3 or 4 metal cups are there, and these 3 and 4 metal cups are free to rotate on a vertical shaft whenever the wind blows. The stronger the wind, the faster is the rotation. And a meter is attached at the bottom. This meter then count how many times the anemometer spins in a certain period of time, and this is linked with the speed of wind. So by looking at how many times anemometer spins in a minute, for example, will give you idea about the wind speed in kilometers per hour. So that is the next weather parameter. Then next is the humidity. Humidity we have discussed is the last element of the weather on our list. It simply refers to the amount of water vapor that is present in the atmosphere. Now humidity depends on various other parameters. For example, what can control humidity? Temperature. What else? Wind. What else? Pressure. And most importantly, even location. So temperature, wind, pressure, location, all of them has strong influence on determining the humidity of a particular place. And here one thought experiment is given. Where do you think humidity is likely to be more? One city is Kochi. Kochi, as you know, is located along the coastline of Kerala. So it is a kind of coastal city, we can say. Kochi is example of coastal city. Coastal city means it is located close to the Arabian Sea in this case. Second city is Jaipur. Jaipur is far away from the coast. That means it is inland, far inland. You might guess that Kochi has higher humidity than Jaipur because it is located near the city, near the sea. But how will we know for sure? If we have to compare the humidity level between Kochi and Bangalore, how would you do it? Discuss with your classmates. So basically, you have to measure the humidity level, and before moving forward, we have to also understand that humidity of the air is measured as relative humidity. Air that would contain absolutely air that would contain absolutely no water vapor, which is impossible in natural condition, is rated to have 0% humidity, while air which is full of water vapor, that means no more water vapor can be added in the air, is said to have humidity of 100%. When you talk about dry weather, its humidity ranges between 20% to 40%, while humid weather has humidity range of 60% to 80% of relative humidity. Now again, you have to have a thought experiment. If humidity is in Delhi is at 52%, while in Kochi is at 84%, right? Which of the two places are wet clothes likely to dry faster? And where are you likely to sweat more, assuming the temperature is same in both places? Now, this is a very interesting question actually. So, as you can see, Delhi humidity is 52, Kochi humidity is 84. Now, we have just seen humidity refers to the amount of water vapor. So, in Delhi, the amount of water vapor available in the air is less. In Kochi, it is more. So for drying of cloth, what do you require? Cloth is wet. That means cloth has lot of water, right? Suppose you have you are hanging a cloth here. It has lot of water. For drying, what do you require? You require this water to leave the cloth and go somewhere in the atmosphere. It is logical. If Kochi has very high humidity, there is already enough water vapor present in the atmosphere. More addition of the water vapor becomes difficult. While Delhi has less humidity, that means there is a scope for more and more water vapor to get added in the atmosphere. So the answer would be Delhi. In Delhi, the clothes would basically dry faster. Second question, where are you likely to sweat more? Same logic we apply. Sweating occurs from our body. So suppose you are standing in Kochi and you are sweating. In case of Delhi, because already you have less humidity, the sweat can evaporate. And if sweat can evaporate, that means your sweating would be relatively less. In Kochi, because your sweat is not evaporating, your sweat is still accumulated on your body because humidity is higher, you are profusely sweating here. And that's why the answer would be Kochi. So in Delhi, clothes would dry faster. In Kochi, you would sweat more. Now the question is that how do we measure humidity level? And for that, scientists use an instrument that is called as hygrometer. The measure of humidity is of great importance in many industrial processes such as food processing. Museums also monitor humidity as they need to maintain a dry environment to preserve their exhibit. Many times paintings and all that you have in high humidity condition, we see deterioration of them. Now, the next topic we have to study about is weather stations. As we have seen before, the weather is made up of several elements such as atmospheric pressure, temperature, humidity, and wind speed. So, many times all of these parameters or elements are measured in the same building or at the same place. So, those places where all these weather elements are tracked are called as weather station. Some weather stations are referred as automated weather station. Automated weather station is basically a automated system. That means it is a self-operating system that is installed with various sensors to measure and record weather data. As we have discussed, all of these parameters. Such stations are widely used in fields like agriculture, aviation, navigation, environment monitoring, and all that. Now, in year 2023, the National Disaster for Management Authority set up an automatic weather station at a glacial lake of Sikkim, which is located at an altitude of 4,800 meters above sea level. This is the photograph you can see, the automatic weather station that is installed at the Sikkim glacial lake. It provides us early information about upcoming weather condition, and that plays a very important role in managing disaster as well, because if you are aware about heavy rainfall and all, you can manage disaster properly. Then comes the prediction of weather. So as we have discussed, meteorologists, they collect a lot of data using all these instruments we have seen before, whether it is hygrometer, whether it is anemometer, whether it is the thermometer and all. And based on that, then they study the data and use scientific method to try and predict the weather as such. Such predictions are very important nowadays because climate change has made extreme weather. Extreme weather means conditions of drought, flood, cyclones, they are occurring at more frequent level. Now, this particular map is an example of weather forecast. The entire region of India has been where we have seen forecast for a particular day, that is 19th May 2024. 4. So various different phenomena with parameters are being used here. As you can see, fog, heavy rain, extremely heavy rain, heavy snow, hailstorm, heat wave, ground frost. So all of these are different types of weather that is predicted by the Indian Meteorological Department, as we have discussed. Now let us explore. Some questions are given here. What do you observe happening on that day? Which state have warning sign? Which part of India are likely to be free from severe weather? Which states are likely to face heat wave conditions? What are the causes for warning in Tripura and Lakshadweep? These are the questions that you should try to answer by looking at this particular map itself. So I'm sure that once you have understood the weather elements and parameters and symbols, you'll be able to easily answer all of them. Now, before we move on, if we try to summarize whatever we have learned in this particular chapter. So first point is temperature, humidity, precipitation, wind and atmospheric pressure together define weather at a particular place. Condition of this element is measured using a special instrument. Again, to repeat, temperature used by thermometer, humidity, hygrometer, precipitation, rain gauge, wind, anemometer, atmospheric pressure. What is atmospheric measured in? Answer is barometer. So all of these instruments are basically measuring this condition. Data keep on getting collected. Data are collected from these stations and thus are able to help us monitor and predict the weather as such. In different types of situations, one of the element is dominant. For example, rainfall occurs mostly in July. Temperature is highest in May. Temperature is highest in May and lowest in December. Atmospheric pressure becomes dominant when a cyclone is moving because you have low pressure at the center. Wind, when a loo is blowing, a strong, hot and dusty wind that blow in northern part of India in summer, or forest fires are spreading. So if wind is very strong and forest fire is taking place, we can imagine that the spread of forest fire will take place at a very rapid rate. Now, weather is closely linked to climate. We will discuss this in the next of chapter. So that's all for this particular chapter. I hope you understood what is weather, what is atmosphere, what are the different parameters and elements of weather, and how do we measure it. Thank you very much.